Blimey. Ooh, this is one hell of a jam jar you got here.
Warning. The House of Mystery contains demons, angels, elementals, magicians, wizards, apparitions, adult language, and discussions. If you're easily offended, do not enter the House of Mystery.
All right, then. On with the show.
All right, hello, welcome everyone to the House of Mystery, the John Constantine and Friends podcast. I'm your host and curator of the House of Madness, and of course, the demon bisexual butler is here.
Hello, everybody. I'm very excited actually for today, Mike, because right now I'm going to say it. This is probably the best event comic this year.
This year?
This year.
Well, that's not saying much. Come on. I mean,
But that does, because we've been waiting for a really good event comic series.
I would say it's probably one of the better events within the last several years.
I'll give you that. I mean, especially in regards to DC Comics.
Metal, Snyder's first round at Metal was okay. I enjoyed it. It got a little ridiculous towards the end with all of the different
Tyrannosaurus Batman.
Yeah, but overall it was pretty fun. The second round at Metal was just not that good.
Yeah.
At all.
And then, you had the flub of the Watchmen reboot, which they tried to do and install in DC Comics, and that kind of fell by the wayside. Mm-hmm. And then you had I think it was Frontier, Unlimited Frontier. That was the one that followed everything, where Deadman and Wonder Woman was center stage, and it was good.
It wasn't Ultimate Frontier, but you got the second part right.
Yeah, but it was good, but it was like not a lot of people talked about it. It kind of flew by under the radar. Dark Crisis, that's very fan base split. I say it was good.
Mm-hmm. Infinite Frontier.
But then after that was Dark Crisis, and Dark Crisis, as I said, it's like split the fan base. Then you follow that up with Lazarus Planet, which everyone basically panned.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people that weren't very too happy with that. But for the most part, it seems like most fans are enjoying or have enjoyed the Night Terrors event. And that makes me happy, because I definitely am one of those readers. I definitely enjoyed Night Terrors. Williamson definitely has a handle on Deadman. That was definitely the key for me.
I think so.
Going into this event, when I had found out that Deadman would be front and center. Now, I didn't know he would be the literal, narrative device that would be used to pretty much craft the entire event together. That I wasn't aware.
Yeah.
So I was pleasantly surprised, and the way he utilized him throughout the event was spot on. I mean, I'm a Deadman. I wouldn't say I'm a Deadman expert. I'm more of a John Constantine expert, but I know a lot about Deadman. I've read pretty much everything I can get my hands on. The only thing is that there's been so many years and gaps in between. I can't even speak right now. There has been a lot of breaks in between my reading of Deadman. Whereas with John Constantine, I go back continually and reread various story arcs.
And Constantine is one of those characters that DC is not afraid of revisiting time and time again.
Yeah.
Because we talked about in the past the problems with Deadman. While Deadman's a fantastic character, you could tell amazing stories with him. A lot of writers flub what to do with Deadman because of what his power set is. How do you tell a story where a person jumps from body to body? It doesn't necessarily have his own power set.
See, in a lot of ways, it feels like a no-brainer to me. Okay, you have a person who can't move on, who's stuck in this static, immaterial state. He's a ghost. Okay, existentialism. Let's delve into that. Let's use that as the foundational ingredient that will then be used to create this elaborate story for Deadman. I don't feel like it's that difficult. However, obviously it is. But Williamson did, in fact, delve into those philosophical aspects. he didn't do it overtly because you don't really do those types of things in mainstream pieces.
No.
But that doesn't mean he wasn't using it as a guiding line or a guiding principle for his overall event.
And I think that's what was the genius of Night Terrors was like, this was being touted as almost kind of like a Halloween event series for around October for DC.
Yeah.
And what they've essentially have done with Night Terrors is turned a kind of a fad type of comic series that you would normally just toss to the side. Oh, this is their annual Christmas special and around that fair.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, they gave us a really in-depth story that ties well to DC that affects the universe past its ending.
And I'm wondering if that's the reason why. And if there is information out there, listeners, please send it my way at Hellblazer Dude on X.
It took you a second to actually remember, right?
I can't wrap my mind around the name change between Twitter and X. It's so
X.
stupid. Yeah. There could be reasons why they didn't want to wait until Halloween, until the Halloween season. I'm wondering if there are other stories in the works where they needed these changes to be set up prior to October or the final quarter of the season.
In my headcanon,
You think that's the case?
I think that basically in my own headcanon, because we don't know what goes on in the bullpen in DC as much unless you want to actually take their statements on their social media accounts by any standards. But like, I think in my own headcanon, Jim Lee looked at everyone's ideas when he took over as lead editor and was like going, okay, we're going to do, this looks good. Let's work with this. Let's work with this. And he got to Williamson's pitch for Night Terrors. And he probably was looking at going, why are we just wasting this opportunity to do a Halloween special when we can do a tie-in to make all the events feel relevant?
Yeah. And then end with a big old fat question mark.
Exactly.
Which we're going to get into during our discussion today because, yes, in fact, we will be wrapping up all of our Night Terrors discussions. Whatever issues that we have left, which is Night Terrors 3, 4, and then the conclusion, Night's End.
Night's End.
That's what we're going to be covering today in a single episode. So we will be wrapping up officially our Night Terrors coverage.
Mm-hmm.
So just as a reminder, the event was led by Joshua Williamson. He is also the writer of Night Terrors 3, 4, as well as Night's End. So ultimately, what we were given with this event series was a canon-defining, universal building of the greater DC continuity. That's essentially what this event series amounted to, and that's not what I was expecting. And all of this was done with Deadman at the forefront, which ended with big changes for the character. So it wasn't just cosmologically driven. It was also character driven with the goal to change Deadman's overall, not his characterization, he is still going to be Deadman, but to change his story from being this static character that really hasn't evolved since his conception.
Yes.
Now, that's not to say there hasn't been fantastic Deadman stories. There has been, but he's always essentially the same being. He's dealing with being a ghost. He's dealing with being lonely.
Lonely, yes.
And I've read a lot of Deadman stories, and I don't believe I've ever read something as definitively character changing as the ending of this event was when it comes to Deadman. Have you?
No. The closest thing I've ever seen was when Neil Adams took the character. Mm-hmm. Because like when Neil Adams took the character, I think back around the 1980s, that's when you saw...
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, you really saw the background of Deadman start to change.
Yeah,
it was became more religious based. It became more mythological based, dealing with Kushna and dealing with the psychological element of Deadman.
Yeah,
And that was back in the 1980s.
And that was more just fleshing out the character and the world that he resided in, the mystic, right?
Mystic.
This is almost like, decades too late, but almost like chapter 2 in Dead Man's story. At least I'm hoping, and we're jumping ahead. So let's backtrack just a bit, and we're going to get to all that, and we'll definitely, David, be a bunch of Dead Man nerds and start theorizing and speculating what this means for the character.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so we have a lot to sort through, so let's set that aside, but let's get started first with how the writing of these issues were tackled. I really liked the opening vignettes that Williamson used to open up the core issues, giving us those few moments with Dead Man talking to the reader, using that meta writing device did help a lot with emotional comprehension. It also allowed Williamson to say things directly that normally would not work, to essentially jumpstart the narrative, and in doing so, threw the reader quickly into the action.
Well, not only that, it not only did that, and this is one of the reasons why I thoroughly enjoyed Night Terror, was because not only did it do like what you're saying, he was able to stick to themes that made you feel like this was a different comic. Like, it was a genre piece. It was an homage to the old horror comics of the 1970s. And starting off with the narration as Dead Man, and he basically, quote unquote, sets the stage, I thought was so brilliantly done. And in every issue, Williamson does it differently. Like, at one moment, he's talking from like almost like a stage, a Shakespearean stage. Next moment, he's in the circus, and he always changes the situation to Dead Man, but always makes sure that whatever he changes to fits Dead Man's character. And it makes it just doing little details like that in comics just makes it so much more, I think, connective as a Dead Man fan, because you make the character feel so front and center.
Yeah, and it sheds light on potential story inclusions, like directions they may take with Dead Man, which obviously they eventually do. It may take an issue or two within the 4 core issues, including the, well, I guess you can say the prequel, the start, and then the prologue, and then the epilogue. So it definitely worked. His strategy, without a doubt, worked, and I definitely noticed the vignettes being kind of like a take on the old anthology comics, but also felt a lot like the old Tales of the Crypt, which was also based on pulp anthology horror stories.
Yeah, where you have the Vault Keeper or the Crypt Keeper.
Yeah.
That type of narrator. And that role was being filled by Dead Man. But the amazing thing was, doing something like that makes your comic and makes your story feel campy. Williamson was able to actually not only make it feel campy, but also make it feel substantial, like psychologically. The narration that Dead Man's giving us is insight into his own psyche.
There you go. It's filled with insight.
It's
not just words, which is what you typically get with a lot of these mainstream events. That is one of my biggest complaints that people on this that listen to our show have heard me complain about time and time again. In a lot of these mainstream comics, it's just talking and flash action. And it doesn't mean anything. It's just cliche superhero tropey dialogue that really means nothing. It helps fill the page, and every once in a while it'll push the plot forward in some way, in some superficial sense. This wasn't that. Everything that, at least, I mean, yes, there were those moments where you had the typical villain type of one-liners that makes me roll my eyes, but when talking about the vignettes themselves, it wasn't just talking for talking's sake.
No.
It was setting the stage, as you had mentioned, and getting us ready for what we're about to see.
Yes.
And this is one of those moments, Dave, I was talking about in our last discussion when I said that Williamson has been able to walk the line between simply mainstream fare and something a bit more than the typical. He wanted to say something about the human condition, and he did so in the best way a mega mainstream event would allow. And ultimately, the strength of this event is because of what Williamson did with Deadman.
Yeah.
He really pushed Boston Brand's story potentially to new heights.
Well, the amazing thing was, like, when you take a look at the entire story, how it starts in issue 1 and comes to the conclusion of issue 4, Deadman's mentality is what kicks us off thematically. Deadman questioning, this is the lifestyle of a superhero, and how all the superheroes are glorified, right?
Right.
And then as we watch this story unfold, we see that basically Deadman, the story in itself is Deadman's point of view of being a superhero.
Yeah.
And when you get to the conclusion, which I loved the consequences. And that's the biggest thing with mainstream events and everything. I always feel your consequences to your main event should be earth-shattering. It should be defining. For example, like in Dark Crisis and Infinite Frontier, while I like the stories, when you get to the end of each of those events, you never feel that basically, oh, okay, these are the ramifications of this is how it affects the universe. Oh, these heroes came back. Okay, or these villains come back. Here, at the very end, the universe is affected, meaning it's going to be a new status quo. It's not just, oh, heroes return, villains die, or villains return, heroes die. This is more substantial because it's affecting the world that the heroes live in.
Yeah. And you had said that, I forgot the word you used now, but you had mentioned that even from the very beginning, he was already working towards this direction by having this set up with the superheroes and having Deadman make his observations, as you had mentioned. Yeah. And that's why I said that his strategy was tight, because from the very beginning, this was all done, but not just through your typical rudimentary plot structure. He actually acclimated the reader at the beginning by using these philosophical vignettes, choosing the correct key dialogue to push these ideas forward, the use of soft rhetorical elements like irony, symbolism, as well as characterization. These were all things that he was using to create this story and create coherence.
And that's the biggest thing too, is not only was he able to actually do that type of coherence with just these 4 issues, but I remember when me and you were looking at the release of all the Night Terrors and including like the side issues, and we were like going, why the hell is he doing this character? Why is this character so relevant to Night Terrors? When you actually take the moment to actually read those issues, the theme is what ties everything together. It is how the world views that hero, or how that hero views themselves. And I mentioned this in one of the last shows we did covering Night Terrors. I regret not covering Superman Night Terrors.
Yeah, I remember,
because that was written by Williamson. If you read that now, it makes complete sense why the story, the themes and the way the story ends makes so much sense, because like there is no bigger person that you can change the ideology of than Superman, because that's what Williamson was trying to do. He's trying to change the way that society looks at these heroes. There is no bigger hero on the DC scale that you can change mythology-wise or meaning or like symbolism-wise than Superman.
Well, you're right. Even the changes that we've been speaking about pertaining to Deadman, those types of changes you can do to a character like Boston Brand, because he isn't the the three, you know,
He
like
isn't the Trinity.
The Trinity there. That's the word I was looking for. He isn't the Trinity, which I believe we talked about that in depth during our last discussion, that there's only so much you can do with. I'm not one of those naysayers when it comes to Superman stories saying, oh, he's unrelatable. That's why it's so hard to make him a successful character nowadays. I disagree with that.
I disagree with that.
What I'm trying to say, there's only so many things you can do to change those three characters without fans throwing their hands up in protest.
Yes.
And I would be one of those fans. There are things you just can't do. And obviously the DC publishing company and the writers, they get that. That's why they have various iterations of Batman
Yes.
being played by other people, the Bat family, if you will, because that allows them the diversity of story and going in different directions. And now they're doing that with Tom Taylor's Superman or Superboy.
Yes.
They're finding new ways to do new stories without derailing the core identity of our Trinity.
Yes.
But Boston Brand, he despite my love affair with this character, there are things that you can do without people getting upset because he isn't as well known. And to be perfectly honest, this is a character I mean, let's just be real about it. He's been squandered as fuck.
Oh, no, absolutely. Because it ties into what I've always said when it comes to us covering the darker side of DC is like there are characters that writers just seem to be afraid to take to try to do stories about because it is such a daunting task to do stories that
You need
tie with people that don't have the atypical superhero complex.
Yep.
Like say like characters like the Spectre and Phantom Stranger, people that were in the darker side of DC with the Justice League Dark. Deadman is right there in that type of power echelon type of themes that you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of writers, maybe they get a little intimidated. They look at it and say, oh no, I'll stick to my cape story. I'll stick to my story that I can tell about Superman flying around and beating Lex Luthor, because it's going to take a lot more of a task to do a story on Deadman and try to make it work.
Yeah. And this isn't us shitting on Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman.
No.
Wonder Woman. It's actually the opposite. We're advocates for keeping them who they are.
Who they are.
And that's why these types of characters are sometimes the better choices to push these event series through, because you can do so much more with them. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm far from a comic book historian.
And I think that's the smart thing that Williamson did with his story. His story wasn't about physically changing something about the character.
Right.
It was about changing the world around them.
It was about changing the perspective.
And change
the world's perspective of the heroes.
Yes.
That you can change.
And you could change that. And and honestly, that was the best thing that he could have done, because a lot of other writers have tried that and have failed because their story concepts don't get carried on.
Yeah. And we'll get into that in a moment. I want to tackle that more towards the end of the show because it'll flow better, because I have lots of things to cover when it comes to that. We have the Waller stuff.
Yes.
The new, what is it? The fate of Dr. Hate? Is that what the helmet of
Dr.
hate?
Hate, the helmet of hate.
Yeah, we'll get into all that stuff later at the end of the show. Okay, so bringing us back to Deadman, one particularly powerful moment is when Deadman sees himself dead. Typically in fiction, and this is why, when a writer does such a thing, it is due in part because it often raises questions and themes related to identity, existence, and the nature of reality. Mm-hmm. These are all three key components to Deadman's characterization and the key ingredients to some of the best Deadman stories.
Yes.
The former two, identity and existence, are always at the center of a Deadman story, whether it be overtly stated or not. And the same can be said about this story. The latter, the nature of reality, is a metaphysical endeavor that almost always is the foundational narrative arena where a Deadman story unfolds.
Yes.
And I mean, I'm going to leave it at that because I could probably spend the next 2 weeks talking about such a thing.
Oh, yeah.
So, setting aside the greater implications to the greater DC continuity, all of this seemingly, David, was about positioning Deadman in a place where writers can possibly move the character beyond its origins. Perhaps this is how we update the character for newer audiences. That's one thing I was thinking, because I know that's one big factor when DC Publishing is trying to put together their plans for the future. And this is not just the comic book business. This is the movie business as well. They're always thinking about how they're going to capture the next generation, because that's the people, those are the individuals that will keep the IPs alive. They quit marketing to us after the age of 30.
Yes.
They don't care about anyone over 30. If we happen to like it, fine. But for the most part, they're marketing to the younger generation.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do something like this with Deadman, it does start presenting those questions. Are they doing this so they can start changing this character and truly updating him for younger audiences?
I really think so, because this is one of the elements that I really enjoyed about the story was doing a story centered around characters that mass audiences are not familiar with. Our main characters in Night Terrors is Deadman, Boston, Sandman,
Right.
with Dodds, and Damien. And I started thinking about it. I'm going, the inclusion of Damien made sense because Damien is so connected to newer fans and the newer fan base. They're going to actually get to know the other two legacy characters, Deadman and Sandman, through Damien.
Yeah.
And I thought that's how you bring in those new readers. That's how you can suddenly have like newer fans
Be introduced to other characters.
Yeah, and wanting to see the characters brought forward.
Yeah. I thought about that too. Yeah, I liked what they did and the strategy. This is how you strategically map out the future.
Yeah,
Now, that's also David saying that if they actually stick with this, because they have done this in years past, and I'm going to save negativity for later.
Okay, all right, because I do have my negativity.
Because we know that they've done these things before. We're like, oh my God, it's all going to change. And then they're like, well, let's go back to Batman. We were going to use Superman. Remember that when Superman was this 5-6 years ago when Superman was going to be used to recontextualize the greater DC universe, and then that lasted all of 6 issues. And they're like, okay, well, no one likes the new villain, which I loved him.
I loved Insomnia.
No, the new Superman villain
new
they introduced
Supervillain,
when they changed or reworked Superman's origins with the destruction of Krypton. Zolgar or I forgot the name of the new villain.
I think it started with a Z.
Yeah, but that storyline was supposed to recontextualize everything, and that lasted until they got their first quarter reports back in sales. Like, well, abandon ship, everybody. Well, what can we do next? Well, let's use metal. We'll use metal to change everything.
Well, also the sad part is, and this leads into one of my negative points, is like, the strategy of DC now is to all of a sudden we're going to do main events and we're going to have one writer be the focus, right? For this one, it was chosen to be Williamson's turn. In the next big event, you're going to have a different writer. And that writer is going to actually want to focus on their own things.
Yeah, but they need to start doing what TV shows do and movies do and say, you know what? We have one singular person who calls the shots. And I know they technically do.
They technically do, but he doesn't make those type of calls.
They need someone to say, I have the map of what we're doing for the next 4 years, and they need to stick to it. Now, don't start promoting it and make mistakes like DC movies do and Marvel movies do, and then when there's cancellations and people point to them and say, look, you guys suck, you can't do anything. Just keep it a surprise. Just That's all. You need to have your plan. We don't need to know your plan. We will find out your plan as we read your stories.
As we read the stories, yeah.
So anyways, the reason why I address this changing aspect to Deadman continually is because they really did just hammered away at certain details when it comes to Deadman, things that have always been there and present, like the aspect of his loneliness. Many times it's done through metaphor or narrative parallels, whereas here you have Williamson, who's operating both within the tangible and intangible.
Yeah.
And he overtly states something that really is the embodiment of Boston Brand's character when insomnia tempts him with a family.
Yes.
We find out that Deadman can't become ensnared in a single nightmare because he's already living his nightmare, which is being alone.
When we got to that point, that reveal, I wanted to see if you've gotten to it yet, because I'm going that itself.
I was just like sad face.
Yeah. I'm like, oh,
sad face emoji.
This is Mike's jam right here.
Oh yeah, I love it.
And when you read that, basically that Deadman's like going, I'm already living in my own hell. And
God, that needs to be said in a movie. Can you imagine if that was like a moment, a turning point in a movie, kind of like Hulk in the first Avengers movie? He's all, the trick is I'm always angry. Imagine them doing something like that with Deadman, with a statement like that. You can't tempt me. Hell. You can't tempt me because I'm already living my worst
nightmare. And it's
that's
like
fucking gangster.
Oof. And it hits so hard too when you get to that point. And the best thing by far is like the thing I love how he tackled Deadman and the Night Terrors was like, well, Deadman had his moments of action because he took over the body of Batman and did all the swinging around and all the fighting, physical fighting in Batman's body. Cool. The true action that was happening gets settled not with like flying fists and drop kicks. It ends with Deadman fighting. I don't know how you would say like his weapon was essentially his mind.
Yeah.
The fact that he didn't need powers. He didn't need powers to destroy or to defeat Insomnia. He just needs to actually tell Insomnia that his goals meant nothing to Deadman because Deadman already was living in his own nightmare.
You can't defeat me.
You can't defeat me.
Because I'm already living my worst nightmare. That is the best thing ever. I am amazed that we haven't seen something like that before.
I think that, and that's what I loved about that story, because like he didn't defeat him with a punch to the face and knock him out. No, he knocked him out with a sense of reality.
Yeah. Yeah. Seriously.
And the reason why I loved Insomnia so much, the way he was used here, he was the parallel to Deadman. Because if you think about it, Insomnia could never understand that, because to Insomnia, he felt that his origin, which, you know, no spoilers here, but his origin is so tragic, but it's like to him, that's his nightmare. But it's like when you compare his nightmare to Deadman's has it worse.
Well, it shows, I like that you brought up the parallel aspect because it actually shows the difference, the contrast between people who live in the past, who are stuck. And of course, we know Deadman's stuck, but the point of the story was to show that he's actually ready to move on.
And dude,
that's why
so
the parallel is so great.
Yeah.
Because you have this aspect of introspection, or in this case, you know, the philosophy of mind. Self-awareness is a key component of introspection. And this was brought to the forefront when Deadman was thinking about his corporeal existence. He said before his death, he craved the spotlight, but now he's basically trapped as the audience. These are all introspective moments. And we know, for the most part, I think most of us realize that introspection is really the only way to growth.
Yes.
If we are one of those people who don't actually sit and ponder our life and the choices we make, then we continually make the same mistakes. And the fact that this was designed as a bit of an introspection, it actually makes sense why this is the moment when Deadman actually does ascend. Essentially, this is him ascending. I mean, Williamson actually worked for this moment. He didn't just decide he wanted Deadman, or he wanted Deadman to sacrifice himself and move past his origins, but it was actually sewed within the narrative from the beginning, and that's why the payoff actually worked.
Yes.
That's why when we read the lines that his deal with Ramakrishna was over a long time ago worked. When he says he's sick of being the audience and he sacrifices himself to save the world, it matters that much more because Williamson worked for that. It wasn't just some last minute, oh, you know what would be pretty cool if he does that, which actually does happen a lot in these event series. Williamson didn't fall victim to the typical event series pitfalls. He worked for every key moment. And it also retrospectively works adjacent to other Deadman stories like Dark Mansion of Forbidden Love.
Forbidden Love.
Just to name one of several, where there's an ambiguity behind his inability to move on. We get the idea that he's had to figure out why, or
why he's still here.
Correct. Exactly. Why he's unable to move on from his ghostly existence. Well, with this story, it frames out and answers much of those ambiguities because there's always been those allusions to reasons why. Well, because he's stuck in the past, which goes hand in hand with the very thing that he is, the manifestation of this apparition, being a ghost. Look at all of those famous ghost stories. Why are you a ghost? Because you don't have the ability to move on. So essentially, Deadman wasn't ready until this moment.
Until that moment.
He had not grown as an individual to fully grasp the error of his ways and the hubris in which he wallowed.
And not only that, but like not just understand it, but embrace it. That was the thing. That's the difference between him and Insomnia. And that's why the ending of it, where essentially Deadman goes, essentially wins by moving on and going to heaven, right? Visually, it looks like he ascends. And then you have Insomnia, who can't let go of his past. He's constantly driven by his own thirst for some kind of self-vengeance because he blames himself for his family. He blames the heroes for the family, but he won't let it go. So what ends up happening to him? He goes to hell.
Yeah.
and you see that parallel, and I'm like going, this is one of the most poetic stories that I've read that DC has done, because like they usually just go wham slam, let's do a gigantic 20-man brawl in the very end and have splash pages galore. Here we get an ending that basically has some soul to it.
It has a soul to it. It wasn't perfect. I don't want listeners thinking, oh my God, these guys are blowing this series. Listen, it wasn't perfect. And we're focusing on what we do on this show, which is the darker side of DC, Deadman. And everything pertaining to Deadman was near perfect. The overall event might not have been perfect, but the Deadman stuff, fuck, dude. I mean, it's some of the best Deadman stuff we've been given in a long time.
And we haven't even touched on the whole story of Dodds, a character that gets brought back to solve a case that he failed at, that he couldn't find out. He had to finish that one last case. Yeah. And I'm like going, that's actually really cool. That ties into the whole the ideology of moving on, getting past your past.
Yeah, it was all governed thematically. So speaking of this idea that Deadman is moving on, now I hope this is in fact the case, because it does seem like it is. I mean, Williamson did effectively end Deadman's story.
Yes.
Or at least a major chapter in his existence, because he literally had Deadman, through his original comics, or throw his original comics into the fire.
Into the fire. How awesome, how visually awesome was that?
Yeah, so taking this along with everything we've just discussed, what else could it be? It has to be a closing of a chapter that's been open for 40 years.
Yes.
And I'm willing to walk through that door and see this new chapter and see what they do. I really hope they don't just revert and take Deadman right back to square one. Now, obviously, we're going to have our one-off stories, our non main DC continuity stories. You're going to have the Black Label stuff that probably uses the old version of Deadman. That's always going to be there. But when it comes to the main DC continuity, they got to just go with it now. They just let this character evolve. He's been stale for so fucking long. It's time to do something a little different. Now, I'm not saying you change the character and give him a snazzy, return, post death of Superman, and you give him a snazzy new power and a blue suit. I mean, that's not going to work.
That's not going to work.
No.
But give us something new with the character now.
For sure.
Introduce something that basically we can say, okay, this is the next chapter in Boston Brand's life.
Right. Yeah. Now, there was a line that Deadman said after throwing his comics into the fire that probably had more meaning to the greater DC universe than Deadman himself. And it was the comment that horror stories never have happy endings, only survivors.
Yes.
So Insomnia was defeated.
Yeah.
But he actually won.
Yes.
And the heroes lost.
And I loved it.
He managed, and this is one of those key defining aspects we were talking about when it comes to canon at the top of the show. He managed to turn the entire world against the heroes through fear.
Yes. But he did it so smartly because it's not like overtly, oh, suddenly there's going to be like a superhero registration act or something, right?
Right.
It's just basically changing.
It's a cosmic fear.
A cosmic fear.
It's a Lovecraftian fear.
Yes. And it's like one of those things that basically you're only going to see it subtly in the stories. You're not going to see it overtly happen. You're going to see it subtly. Like that's why I love the ending of like the child who worshipped superheroes suddenly telling her parents, oh, superheroes aren't good anymore, or I forgot what she said. I think they're not cool anymore.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And basically, the father basically said, some of them can be a little scary. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, okay, I like what you did there because that's how you change a world.
Yes, and it's going to make the stories probably a little more relatable to modern audiences because most of us in this world, at least in Western culture, we, over the last, 10, 15 years, have slowly gotten to a point where we don't actually fully trust the people in positions of power.
Yes.
We're jaded. We are disillusioned with our institutions. And in the world of DC, one of the biggest institutions are the heroes. So if you can turn the perception to something less than stellar, more cautionary, more hesitant towards our heroes, it actually will take a lot of the things that have been feeling stale about some of our favorites, and it will breathe new life because you can tell new stories with characters like Batman, like Superman, like Wonder Woman, who are now trying to contend with this new perception.
Yes.
A distrust.
And think about it. I mean, the character that would affect the most is probably Superman, because Superman is a symbol of hope.
Yep. I actually want to start. I want to go seek out and start reading Superman regularly again because I'm hoping to see these changes take effect.
Yeah. And the amazing thing, I know we didn't cover it, but just to sum up the Superman Night Terrors one, the fear of Superman was the fact that he was afraid that basically people would start viewing him as a totalitarian. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Totalitarian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where basically he is the unforgiving figure. Like, oh, you have to do what I say because I'm Superman. I will lead you into a new world. And you find out that that's his fear. And now, the way Night Terrors ends, Superman's fear is going to come true. People will actually fear him when, all Superman wants to do is bring hope and justice to the world, and people now aren't sure about him.
Yeah. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens moving forward. There's even bigger changes to the world of DC because, yes, okay, we're talking about the fact that the rose-colored glasses have been removed. But now we have this reveal that it wasn't actually Insomnia pulling the strings.
Yes.
But it was, of course, who else?
Who else could it have been?
It was Waller. She was behind everything. And it had pretty much at least what they alluded to and stated, I should say, it had everything to do with the retrieval of the Helmet of Hate.
Because the Helmet of Fate is missing.
I mean, dude, the Helmet of Hate?
Yes.
Come on. That's awesome.
Oh, dude, when they did the reveal, I was like going, oh, shoot, that's right. Because if you are an avid DC reader, you know for a fact up to this point, the Helmet of Fate's missing.
Now, that was taken, this Helmet of Hate, this was introduced during the Lazarus event, right?
Yes. Yeah, because it was supposed to be the antithesis or the replacement for Dr. Fate.
Okay, here, I have it right here. I just pulled it up. So the ending of Insomnia's global nightmare may have freed the planet from its machinations, but it has also set up DC's next big villain.
Yes.
Okay, fans don't know much about Dr. Hate just yet, but it's clear that he is just as determined to rid the world of metahumans as Amanda Waller and the Light are. It doesn't actually say.
Yeah, because he's just at this point, Dr. Hate is a brand new character, and like people are.
But I'm saying the helmet was introduced in
Lazarus Planet.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's what I was looking for.
But
okay.
like the whole point about Dr. Hate is like, as everyone put it, there's been a crazy conspiracy theory that a lot of people are thinking Dr. Hate, the person who has the Helmet of Hate on right now, is John Constantine.
Oh, yeah, because they did allude to the fact that it's someone that we should all know.
Yes,
because didn't they say something like they can't find out who I am?
They can't find out who I am.
Oh,
and
man.
Like there was a conspiracy among like DC forums saying who's the user of the Helmet of Hate, because
it's Batman.
The user of the Helmet of Fate is gone. He's dead. So the fact that we have this new helmet of quote unquote, in quotations, Fate and a Dr. Hate, who are heroes that are missing right now on the thing? And everyone pointed, the perfect person to be the Dr. Hate is John Constantine.
David, do we know where this Dr. Hate story is going to be taking place? Is he going to get his own
one I don't know.
Or is it part of like Suicide Squad?
I think it's going to be more or less tied with Suicide Squad with Amanda Waller, because Waller's series should be starting up, and it's been highly anticipated.
Yeah.
But like,
well, listen.
Can you imagine if he takes off the helmet and it's John? I'm like going,
I don't know if I want that. Unless it's like some darker version of him.
Would you? But it would make sense.
How would
you gotta think
a darker version of him?
Darker version.
Yes,
like,
if it can't be the actual John Constantine. Unless he's pulling the ultimate con job on Waller.
Well, think of like, remember the last time we ever delved into Constantine, he was dealing with a very darker version of himself with Old Man Constantine.
Yeah,
that's his inner thoughts.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, people were actually putting it out there, and I was like going, oh, it does make sense if you actually read Hellblazer. John has some issues that, definitely lends credence into the fact that he could be the possessor of the Helmet of Hate.
Well, we'll see. I can't see him doing this type of stuff to everyone unless there's a really good reason for it. Yeah, so I'm open to anything as long as it makes sense.
It can't be, like Zatanna turned him down for a one-night stand. You can't do that.
Yeah. Speaking of Zatanna, then we need to close out the show. Zatanna has a new sword.
Yeah, she does.
I guess this is going to be her thing moving forward.
Yes, because that's
cool.
She's going to be working with Robot Man. So that, as I said, I really like that team up, and I want to actually see where that goes.
Okay. All right, this brings us to the end of our discussion. My final thoughts, I really enjoyed the event. It's been a long time since I've really thoroughly enjoyed an event. Williamson did a great job with Deadman. I'm actually excited and looking forward to this new chapter in Deadman's story, but also I'm excited and looking forward to this new chapter in the DC universe. Yeah. I'm really stoked to see what they do moving forward. So my RMD score, Night Terrors 3 and 4 gets an 85%. Night's End is an 86%. If I was just doing scores on the Deadman stuff, it'd probably be like in the high 90s. but taking into account all the other stuff,
Yeah.
it's not perfect.
No, it's not perfect.
So that's what an average of round up 86% for the 3 issues. What about you, Dave?
For me, I'm around the same score as you are on issue 3 and issue 4. Together, I would give that 87. Night's End, for me, the way it ends off, it was so awesome
Yeah.
that I gave it an 88. So you could
it's
say
a 1 point difference like me.
Yeah, 1 point difference.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, DC, for giving us this. Very seldom do we thank people. I think the last time we thanked them was during Spurrier's run,
Yeah, Hellblazer.
and then we scorned them when they gave us Taylor's run.
Well, Mike, I didn't want to bring it up. I didn't want to bring it up, but
It's at the end of the show. It's okay.
the next person up who has the next big event is Taylor.
Oh, is it?
Yes, and it's
What's he
DC's
doing?
Beast World or Beast Planet.
Is it part of DC continuity, regular DC
It
continuity?
is. It is.
Well,
so hopefully Tom Taylor won't screw everything up.
Yeah. Well, he's got quite the shadow
He does.
to step out of after this event. All right, this brings us to the end. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Be sure to find us on iTunes, as well as pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts. Just search House of Mystery. Leave us a review. Give us a 4-star rating. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.